Hello, hello. I got to make sure all the things are correct. I'm Miranda Basie, Northeast City Councilor. Excited to welcome you today to our City Council briefing. Myself and Councilor Siggety have a few updates to share with you, so I'll just go ahead and kick it off with some updates and just some kind of summarization, if you will, for some of the conversations we've had about the Aquatics bond conversation. And Jennifer Siggety, Councilor Siggety, and I have been working hand in hand, having a lot of conversations together. So I'll start with some updates, and then she'll have some additional color or details to add to some of those things as well. There's been a lot of discussion that has been out there about these things before we even took office. And so there are a lot of different numbers, a lot of different plans, things like that that have been out there for a while. So before jumping into some updates on what we're expecting to see tonight and kind of the timeline forward, just a quick review for you all. That shortly before Thanksgiving, the council did pass 3 specific resolutions. There were a few amendments to those as proposed, but ultimately that resulted in what we're expecting to see as a $68 million bond package. This would include support for the Frank Olson project at an estimated $47 million, the Keene Park project at an estimated $18 million, and then some improvements to the West Side Recreation Center at an estimated $3 million. That $68 million does include some a 5% kind of you could say contingency, if you will, or some flexibility on those actual project costs. That was a decrease that the council amended to kind of tighten things up to make sure that we are preserving the project as proposed and that we don't allow, one specific project to kind of cannibalize the other. We are tentatively looking at voting on the bond resolutions January 7th and January 14th. Part of those conversations for those resolutions were seeing some programming planning. So that's what we're expecting to see tonight. We've had a lot of conversation with the Parks Department and staff since we passed these resolutions to collaborate on what does that programming planning look like and how can we cast that vision a little bit bigger for indoor recreation for our park system as a whole. So tonight we're expecting some good updates on that. We've had conversations around getting more insight on things like, hey, for indoor recreation, how many facilities, what kinds of, what is the strategy for this? Are these microsites? Are these regional sites? So we're expecting some updates and information on that. We have also asked for some clarity on things like, what are available to people who have passes versus non-passes, different kind of classes, the different kinds of offerings so that we can get some deeper insight into not just the accessibility, but how many people and different kinds of people in the community these kinds of facilities would potentially serve. Before I turn it over to my colleague, Councilor Siggety, who's got some additional notes on this topic as well as some other topics to cover, one of the points of clarity that we've, or at least myself, have had some conversations with constituents about is paying for these bonds. There isn't anything that's proposed that would increase the tax expectations or increase what community members would pay in their taxes to fund these things. So it's just a point of clarity with the $68 million that we're not asking folks to increase their tax commitment. So with that, I'd like to invite Councilor Siggety.
Thank you. Good evening, or good morning. It's been a long day already. Good morning. Councilor Siggety, Jennifer Siggety with the Northwest District, and happy to be here today. As I expected, Councilor Basie covered pretty much everything that was on my notes, so I don't have too much to add. Other than, I do want to reiterate what she spoke at the end about taxes. We're getting a handful of people emailing us, actually probably more than a handful, saying that this pool bond is really going to affect property taxes. And I just want to make it clear that there's going to be really no changes at all to taxes. This bond will be backed by our existing sales tax revenues, specifically the second penny. We've worked really closely with Director Sean Pritchett, our finance director, and he's really laid out very clearly that, we're just in such a good financial position position, the city of Sioux Falls right now, that it really is a good time for us to do this bond. So, and it's not 77 million. I know she already covered this, but just again, there's a lot of public comment out there that this is a $77 million bond. It's not. We paid for $9 million already with cash. So it's what we're looking at right now, and what we're considering is a $68 million bond. And so just want to say that, and it has been a really long process, but I hope that the public recognizes that the reason it's gone so slow is that we're just asking a lot of questions. Council, there's, it's not a secret that the council is not necessarily 100% in agreement with the programming plan, and we've just wanted to see more details. We want to make sure that we're making the right decisions. And so for people who may be frustrated with how slow this process is, I was speaking with my colleague yesterday, and I said, this is a 50-year decision that we're making. I mean, when I'm not even around anymore, my maybe great-grandkids will be swimming in these facilities possibly. So I think it's just really important that we make the right decisions for the people of Sioux Falls. So with that, we'd be happy to take questions about pools, but I want to cover one other thing, probably why it's been such a long day. We had a legislative breakfast this morning at 7 a.m. Where it was open to the public. I know there was a little bit of media there, so you may see something about it. But 3 of us city councilors sat down with legislators and staff, along with some Minnehaha County commissioners and some other local governments. Del Rapids mayor was there, the Brandon mayor was there. And we talked about our legislative priorities this upcoming legislative session. And so we have a resolution that's been drafted that will be considered by the city council on December 17th. And once it's approved, however it ends up looking, it'll be forwarded to every legislator before the legislative session starts January 14th. So I just want to highlight the 5 issues that at this point we've drafted that we're going to bring to the legislature. One is we're going to ask for support for additional state funding, and we're thinking $1 million for the Dakota Mainstream Water Project. The city of Sioux Falls, we're looking at water planning out to 2065, and knowing that we're going to need another water source, we are hoping for some funding for that Mainstem Water Project. The second one is to support for additional funding to support expansion of the Sioux Falls Regional Airport. This afternoon at 4 o'clock, the regional airport manager is going to be speaking to us at the informational meeting and sharing just kind of the vision for another concourse with, I believe, 5 additional gates. And so we are asking, last year, the legislature appropriated $10 million for airports across the state, and Sioux Falls received 2.5. The additional 5 or 6, it is 5 or 6 gates. The expansion will be around $100 million, maybe even higher than that. So we're looking at federal partnerships, state, city, just kind of working together to make that happen. The third one is to support changes in how the Child Care Assistance Program is administered. For those of you who've been following the child care discussions we've been having, one of the main findings that Justin Smith, our consultant, has figured out is that we are one of the we use a very small fraction of the federal child care assistance. So there's federal dollars set aside that are that come into the state to be able to use for child care assistance for low-income families that can't afford child care, and very few families that qualify for that would be able to take advantage of that are not using it. And part of it is it's a difficult application process. Sometimes there's language barriers. And so we are going to ask the legislature to kind of administer that in a more efficient way so that we can take advantage of those federal dollars. The fourth one is to support legislation that provides law enforcement with the necessary tools to address motor vehicle violations, but not limited to speed racing. This is one that I've gotten a lot of comments about, the motorcycles and the speed racing that happens in Sioux Falls. So Chief Toom has asked us to ask the legislature to support something to help them combat that a little bit better. And then 5, finally, we want the legislature to support the governor's school safety grant that was announced during her budget address. She's requesting $10 million, and we're going to ask the legislature to support her in that. And with that, I think we would be happy to take any questions regarding legislative priorities, aquatics, or whatever else you have to throw at us.
I want to ask about child care.
Yeah.
Sorry. Because it came up in the presentation from Mr. Smith. 7% of the eligible families are applying or receive assistance, correct?
Yes.
So there's clearly a problem, a disconnect here between the money we get from the federal government and the money we're spending on child care. Do you know what happened to that money?
I believe we just don't get it. I mean, it's not that it's coming at a lump sum and then the state's keeping it, is to my knowledge. Jim, am I right on that? He's not sure.
Do you
Don't
know,
fact
so
check me on that.
it talked about a lot of,
Yeah.
Mr. Smith talked about a lot of possible changes. Do you have some concrete things that you want the legislature to do, or just look at it?
No, one of the things we for sure are going to ask, I guess, I'm not sure we're asking the legislature, but something that the conversation is right now, it's a paper process, a paper application process. We'd like to see that online. We'd like to see it available in other languages, but mostly online, because right now what happens is it's a fairly complicated application from my understanding. And so let's say a young single mother fills out that application, it gets sent into peer, mailed by mail, it gets mailed to peer, that's the only way to submit it, is my understanding. They have, let's say, 7 days to process it, and then they mail it back and say, oh, these 4 mistakes are on here, so you have to refill it out again and go through the whole process. I mean, by this time, she's lost her job because she doesn't have childcare, and so she's having to stay home. And so we think it's just kind of a barrier. So the online part is one of them. Another thing, and I don't quote me on this, I'm not 100%, but it has to do with women in shelters, and sometimes if there's a situation where there's no child support, but maybe the victim doesn't want to contact a former domestic abuse partner, so there's a process that we want some of those strings not attached, so that basically people can apply without having to name former non-child support payers, things like that. So does that make sense? So there are some specific barriers. Justin would be able to fill you in a lot better than me, a lot more eloquently, but that's a couple of them.
A question on the aquatics piece. Earlier on in these discussions several months ago, there was a lot of disconnect among the council about the cost that families will pay to use those facilities. Have you seen resolution to that? Do we know what a pool pass is going to cost to swim at Frank Olson or Keene Park?
We do. I know Frank Olson and the West Side, so I have the exact pass dollars. They're back with my stuff, but I can tell you the exact amounts. And because we did vote on that. I mean, we did vote on the fee structures, so that is set. You can actually go out to the city's website on Parks and Rec. They have them all listed very clearly. I actually stopped by the West Side Rec Center yesterday and can I have that? They're handing out brochures now at the West Side. I heard from someone that they're handing out brochures and has very clearly listed exactly what the prices are. And there has been this was a point of contention, you're right, Megan, this summer. And we all kind of had to compromise. I think that it was one of those compromise situations. So I'm only going to speak for myself. Some of these rates are fantastic. I will tell you anecdotally, my own mother is a member here, and she said, "Oh my gosh, this is fantastic! My rates are going down so much," and she thinks this is wonderful. I will say, as someone who had small kids in Sioux Falls, I think the family rate, this is just me, not speaking for the council, I think the family rates are still a little higher than I'd like to see them, but I mean, it was a compromise. So I think we've done a great job for veterans, seniors, people with disabilities, low income. I think the rates are very reasonable. Yeah, so I'd happy to share this.
The ones that were set for the West Side will be the ones at Frank Olson. Are Keene Park rates just going to be the same as other public pool rates then?
That's my understanding, is that Keene Park will be, the outdoor water will be about the same around the city. We're trying to make it simple, and that Frank Olson and the West Side will be the same. Yeah. Right. Yeah, you want to add?
I would maybe add to that, when we evaluated rates and we voted on that, Jennifer used the word compromise, and really what was in front of us was the West Side Recreation, right? And that's a footprint that we're inheriting, that's programming that we're navigating. We don't get to potentially build it from the ground up like we're talking about at Frank Olson. So I think as we talk about rates and we talk about what's included in that, it would be, I think it would be a little bit naive to not acknowledge that we're having discussions tonight about future programming expectations, and that's what we're looking for as a long-range plan. So while those rates exist today because we have a facility that people can access and there are amenities and there is programming there, we have to be thinking about the additional amenities in the programming, and pricing structures, pricing details, those kinds of things are likely going to need to be addressed as we figure out kind of more of that long-range planning. And as Councilor Sigety mentioned, there is this desire to make it simple as possible as we get more color to that plan as a whole. So,
Is this vote going to happen? How certain are you? I mean, this has been a long process, as you know. A lot of questions, as you pointed out. This is going to happen. 7th, first reading. 14th, second reading. Boom, done, gone, right?
I would love to tell you that I have a crystal ball and that's exactly how it's going to happen. From my perspective, I think there's a lot of us that would really like to start working on other things in the community outside of of just this bond. But also, I'll borrow a line from Councilor Sigety. This is a 50-year decision, and this is the footprint. This is the groundwork for what indoor recreation looks like in the city of Sioux Falls. We are potentially investing significantly in these facilities. So, from my perspective, the desire with the ask for the programming plan and kind of that incremental step forward of what we're looking at tonight is to continue marching towards a vote. So hopefully it's on those dates. At the same time, as we continue to get more information, as we continue to take in the conversation tonight, there's a potential that there's more discussions.
You guys talked about wanting to push back on the narrative that property taxes will go up because of these projects. Are you asserting that people out there in the public believe the bond is associated or connected to a tax increase, or is it more likely that the operational costs of these long-term will add to the city's overall budget?
A lot of the questions and conversations that I've received or that have fielded have been with the seeming concern that it's directly associated to an increase. I think kind of going back to one of the earlier questions, we all recognize that there's an operational expense to keep these facilities going. And so that's where we're trying to balance what is the right decision for the programming, what is the right decision for those investments, and how we make that accessible to the taxpayers who are funding not just the building of these facilities, but the operations of them. So from that perspective, I'm getting probably long-winded in the answer, but I don't think that the ongoing operational costs have been the focal point of at least the questions that I've fielded. I'll look to you to see if there's anything.
These will run in the red, though, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's been a lot of discussion about that number. Do you have a number in your head now, what the subsidy is going to be annually given compared to what it is now?
There's been a lot of different conversations on cost recovery, and I don't have those numbers in front of me. That's actually a discussion we were having a little bit as well. Some of that's going to, I think, depend on where programming ends up.
I don't have those exact numbers. I think I just watched a couple of the meetings last night. The number 700,000 a year deficit comes to mind for both facilities, but we just don't know because we don't know how many people are going to be using the facilities. So, and I have some strong feelings, again, not speaking for the council, but speaking for myself. I would love to hear more comments from the general public. I'm going to quote former Councilor Greg Neitzert. When these conversations all were happening about a year ago, he said, this is great. We had this survey and people said they want indoor recreation space. We get it. The city needs more indoor rec. But do they want to pay for it? I mean, are they expecting something for free? And so this is something we've all been kind of grappling with a lot for months, for years now, is if we build these facilities, I'd like to see them, again, this is just me, I'd like to see them serve as many people as possible. So that's why I wanted the fee structure low. And to your question, are these going to run in the red? Well, they are, but so do our libraries, so do our bike trail, our bike path, our parks. And if we're really going to be committed to indoor rec and making sure that people can have year-round access to fitness and to walking paths and to playgrounds or indoor playgrounds, I'd like to see these treated more like a park and, and have not just 2,000 or 3,000 people take advantage of them, but have half the city. We have 42% of the households in Sioux Falls take advantage of the libraries. I mean, wouldn't it be great if 42% were taking advantage of indoor rec? We'd have a much more healthy community. So totally just my opinions.
And then I was going to ask, you mentioned it was like a 50-year decision or project. Is there any concern or like with you guys that by the time these pools are built that Sioux Falls will have grown or it won't fit the need anymore from where it is right now?
I mean, I think that's why we're taking so long for these decisions. I think that's always the question is, yeah, if it takes 3 or 4 or 5 years to build something, have we already outgrown it? You know, and then that's why, Councilor Basie touched on it a little earlier, that's why we're really challenging the Parks Department. Before we pass anything, we want to know what the long-range vision is. You know, we're talking about a water system, you know, we know when we're going to be running out of water. In 2065, we're going to need more water. I just met with Director Cotter last week about our 100-year sewer plan. I mean, literally, they're planning sewer out for the next 100 years. And so we've challenged the Parks Department. We want to see those plans. We want to know, you know, in 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, what is the plan for recreation as a whole in Sioux Falls? And so we're looking forward to getting some of those answers.
And on that note, part of that discussion on the long-range planning, you know, when you look at our city, one grocery store doesn't serve the whole city. One library doesn't serve the whole city. So, you know, I think it's logical to think that there's probably a regional approach to this. One facility isn't going to serve the whole city. So going back to that long-range plan, what does that potentially look like and what things should be in those facilities, just like you would have schools all across the city, and what have you.
Question on the programming side of things. Do you guys have a sense of what you'll hear tonight, and what are you looking for specifically from the Parks Department to kind of move this forward? What kind of answers do you want in terms of programming? What do you want to see?
So, right now, if you go and you look online on the agenda, you'll see, the potential maps of Westside Recreation and Frank Olson with some, kind of spaces designated for what those spaces would serve. At the on the additional pages of the document, you see kind of a sample of months of programming. Some of the additional color that I've personally exchanged some emails about that I've gotten a little bit of information on, but that I'd also expect some continued conversation is what does that programming look like for pass holders versus non-pass holders? What does that programming look like for somebody who, I think I saw on the list, there's a clay modeling class that's offered regularly. So what if I'm just really into that and I specifically only want to go to that thing? What does that look like for me if that's specifically what I want to partake in terms of things that are maybe above and beyond a regular pass, like swimming lessons, is what does that look like for a pass holder versus a non-pass holder? So some of the conversations that I've personally received via email in the last 24 hours is that some of that additional, or I think the vocabulary is supplemental programming. I've been informed that those are things that the rates for those would be the same whether you're a pass holder or not, that there wouldn't be a priority to admission for those things or to sign up for those things if you're a pass holder or not, in terms of specific pricing or anything like that. Haven't seen that. But to more directly answer your question, Megan, on what we're expecting, I would say personally, the Councilor Siggety talked about 42% of the community uses the libraries, or the households who use the libraries. And so when we look at how many people in our community are using facilities like this, how can we appeal to as much of the community as makes sense, right? One facility's not gonna necessarily serve the whole city. And how do we make those things easy for people to, if I want to go to a clay modeling class and that's the only thing I'm interested in and I don't want indoor play, how can I make sure that I get access to that? I don't know if there's anything.
You guys be voting on a resolution tonight on the programming? Will it be in the form of a resolution, or how does that look in practice?
It's a motion, I believe. So all the details of how exactly that works, I'm looking at Jim in the back because he's helped us kind of work through that. But my understanding tonight is, this is what's, what they present to us, and it's a motion to, approve it and then move into voting on the bond potentially this January 7th and the 14th. We could kill it, we could defer it, is how I understand that. I'm getting nods, so I think I've learned the process. Anything else? Awesome. Well, thanks for being here, guys.